Hi, Jibril. Good morning.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, it's morning on your side.
Yes, I just woke up. We are ready for the session?
Yeah, very ready.
Okay, so thank you so much for finding time to come to share with us more about digital currency. And yeah, to everyone who is watching us, welcome to the show once again. Continue subscribing and leave your comments. And also, today we are going to be speaking to Jibril. Jibril has, in the first five years, worked in digital currency. So he's a digital currency researcher, and he will be sharing with us more about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, the myths around that. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What is this new currency supposed to solve, and more about that. And also, he's an intrapreneur. So he will also be telling us who is an intrapreneur, so that he can shed more light about that. So Jibril, over to you. Would you like to say hi to the audience and maybe tell us who is an intrapreneur?
So thank you so much, Esther, for having me. My name is Jibril. I first would like to, say hi to your audience who are listening in and keen to learn one or two things about the current shift towards in the technology scene as regards to cryptocurrency and digital currencies and all these manner of things. They go by different names, but we're going to discuss them all. So on entrepreneur, I think I've had in my professional and business career, I've had experiences where, opportunities where I've had to innovate within companies that I've worked for. So when you're working within the company and you're trying to come up with products, you could as well as call yourself as an intrapreneur, because you're doing it from within. And when you're outside, you're doing it for yourself, you can call yourself as an entrepreneur. I would say I'm both, because for the companies I've worked for before, I had the opportunity to really put my ideas into products and services around digital currencies and things to do with know your customer, compliance via technology, and CFT, which is counter-terrorism financing compliance by using of technology.
So that's where the entrepreneur title comes from.
That's quite interesting, because you mentioned the issue of counterterrorism and solving the challenges around that and financial system. I think that is one of the big issues, because they say technology is good, has come with great tools for solving problems, but it is also quite dangerous. It has also brought a lot of threats to personal security, institutions, and everyone.
Yeah.
You will tell us, I think, within the course of the interview in the show. So I take note that you are the former board member for Blockchain Association of Kenya. Could you tell us in a nutshell, what is blockchain?
Okay. So blockchain basically, in the simplest terms, is just a ledger. It's a digital ledger where when you start now going deeper, you start learning about that there is different types of blockchains. So it could be a digital ledger that is distributed, which means that no single entity or company or individual has control over the system. But then that's just a general definition of a blockchain. But there are many blockchains, which could be one, which is a proof of work blockchain that needs participants of that blockchain to do some work before getting a reward or securing the network. Then two, there's proof of stake, where participants of these blockchains have to have a stake within that particular blockchain to be able to perform tasks as writing transactions in blockchain, or writing transactions. Writing transaction as regards to writing signing documents or recording documents, just like on your computer and you are entering a document. So imagine a system where we have many participants, and each participant has a stake where they can be able to compete to record that document on the blockchain, so that everyone can be able to keep a copy of that transaction that has happened. So within the evolution of blockchain, there has been many innovations around or critics of the proof of work consensus algorithm. And proof of stake and delegated proof of stake. So there are many buzzwords out there, but for our viewers, I think the basic, the take-home from this discussion with regards to the understanding of blockchain is a digital ledger, a digital distributed ledger.
Wow. Okay, that's quite interesting. I'm also learning in the process. That's quite interesting to hear that there are criticism around the consensus algorithm way. And I wanted to ask just a little bit. I know you have alluded to that. How does the blockchain work to ensure that the records that happen within the chain, they are safe?
Anyone, anywhere, who has access can be able to can be able to upload data to the blockchain. So participants on a particular network, let's say for example, proof of work network, there are many participants who might want to join the network, but there is a cost to joining the network and there's a cost to writing or keeping the records. So this cost could be incurred in form of electricity bills for running the servers or running the equipment to process the transaction or record the data. And two, there are the hardware. There's electricity costs and there is technical expertise. And so when you look at it, there is money that is involved, huge amount of money when it comes to setting up huge mining or transaction processing facilities. So it's in the best interest of the investors, best interest of a company, whether it's listed or not, to ensure that the data they write on the blockchain is accurate and that they agree on the accuracy of the data. Because otherwise, then they will put at risk for their investment to be seized by law enforcement officers, following a court order. Because if data is inaccurate, for example, let's say data is put out there about an event that is inaccurate, or an event where people like terrorists decide to move huge amount of money via the network, and the miners, the transaction processors, decide to process that transaction. So when they process the transaction, they become part of the system. When you talk about the traditional banks, for example, traditional financial institutions, when investigations are done and court orders are issued, the banks are required to face some form of consequences in terms of did they do enough KYC, due diligence on the customer, to know the source of the funds and where the funds are going to. If they didn't, then they are liable. And we've seen it in Kenya, we've seen it in many parts of the world where banks pay huge fines. So in the case of Bitcoin, all the data stored on the blockchain needs to be, there is an incentive for the transaction processors to ensure that the data is accurate. In the event that it's not, then there could be legal repercussions to that effect. So there's an incentive, there's an economic incentive to ensure that the players act in the best interest of the investment and the best interest of the network.
I know you have started talking about some part of the responsibilities of the people who are using this network or this system of financial. So are there any regulations within Kenya and across the world that actually, monitor and regulate how these transactions are done?
Okay, that's a very timely question. But before I address it, allow me to mention the other incentive. And this incentive for proper use of the network lies on the user. So the users are also incentivized to, use the network in the best interest and in accordance to, the law, whether it currently addresses a transaction on crypto or not. The existing laws on money transfer and movement of money from one place to another. So the data that is stored on the blockchain, I'll give you an example of the Bitcoin blockchain. Stays on the blockchain for a very long time. You can talk about since the blockchain was started in the Bitcoin blockchain was started in 2009. If someone has been using the same wallet on the blockchain, then their entire history from 2009 will still be there. In the next 40 years, if Bitcoin blockchain will still be available, then their entire history will still be available. So when you look at it, in the event that no one cares about this data, but in the event that there is nefarious activity detected within the transaction, then someone will have to look backwards 40 years. So that should discourage users of the blockchain networks not to do nefarious activities on the blockchain, because it stores data for a very long time. So no, someone cannot burn down the office like we see in some countries when there are issues to do with corruption and people decide to ban the finance office so that they can release the data. So that can happen on the blockchain networks. So on addressing the question you asked with regards to if there are laws and policies in place. So in Kenya at the moment, there are no laws in place, but in 2015, through in a circular number 14, the central bank advised banks, commercial banks, and commercial other financial institutions like deposit-taking microfinance institutions not to provide banking services to companies and individuals suspected to be involved in cryptocurrency. So I think there is the goods and bads of that. And the goods is that keeps our financial system, the Kenyan financial system, outside of misuse. Two, then it pushes away crypto transactions, Bitcoin transactions outside of the financial system. And outside of the financial system, you cannot have the view or have an idea of what is happening, how money is moving, because when it moves peer to peer, you don't have control at all, because you're not able to see how the money is moving. But within financial institutions, you can see if a particular user is exceeding their limits with regards to what they're allowed to do with the particular bank accounts or an account held at the deposit taking with financial institutions. So and when you look at it, as much as the that issue was done in that caution was sent across banks in 2015, there has been tremendous increase in cryptocurrency trading in Kenya. So you wonder where the money is moving, and if at all financial institutions have a glimpse into these kinds of transactions. I don't mean that the transactions are bad. I mean there could be transactions that are not nefarious. So the other, so in other countries, like for example, in the US, we've had tremendous progress in terms of regulation. So there's an institution called the Financial Crime Enforcement Network that came up with guidelines on how crypto transactions should be, how compliance should be enforced within for crypto companies. And the good thing is FinCEN applies across all member states. So Kenya is a member state, and FinCEN applies to Kenya as well. So and Africa at large. So we very soon, I think we're going to see the deadline for FinCEN and was January of 2021. So we're going to see move towards enforcing the guidelines laid down by FinCEN, which will be a good move. So these guidelines ensure that, number one, if a person is going to transact with cryptocurrency, then they need to stay within limits. They need to comply with set guidelines, and that in one way or the other will ensure that number one, there is adoption because then there's acceptability. Number two, I think we'll see more people warming up because then the space will be a little bit governable. Then there's another body called the FATF, which is called it's abbreviated as FATF, which means Financial Action Task Force. Also gave guidelines that came into force in 2021 January. So those two bodies, so far, the guidelines so far have been, I think will be more positive to the space to ensure that actors that are best interests will be able to, engage, and in one way or the other will spur adoption. And
I think, when you're explaining and you're like, okay, if people can still do transactions without the traditional financial institutions like banks, you're eliminating the middleman, and then there's this fact about you're no one can be able to know this money is coming from who, going to who, that kind of a thing. Is that a misconception? Are there myths around Bitcoin and how cryptocurrency is being used?
Yes, absolutely. There are myths, and this myth, I think one of the biggest myths was born in 2008. So when the Bitcoin white paper, the white paper that laid out and explained what Bitcoin will become, was released around, I think, August of 2008, if I've not missed the exact month. That was the time when the world was facing one of the biggest economic crises. And then the Bitcoin white paper was released, and people within what we call the cypherpunk movement read the white paper and they were like, okay, so they interpreted the white paper their way, and maintained that cryptocurrency or Bitcoin was created to replace the banks, replace the financial institutions, take over, replace government, and people can be able to self-govern. So I think within the cryptocurrency space, there has never been a bigger misconception than that. That's a misconception. It was just coincidentally, the white paper was coincidentally released at the time when the world was facing one of the worst financial crises, the housing crisis that started in the US. So there's no relation between the release of the white paper and the financial condition, the financial environment the world was facing at that time. It was just pure coincidence. So when you read the white paper, Bitcoin is set out to be, because the white paper title, it's a 9-page white paper, and the white paper title talks about a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Electronic cash. And the problem that it sought out to solve was, one, the internet there have been many attempts at creating the electronic cash for the internet, but most of the attempts failed. So the creator of Bitcoin put together a concept that had been worked on before by people who preceded him, and solved one of the biggest mathematical problems, which was it's referred to as the Byzantine problem. And by doing so, gave the world the best solution towards achieving the internet's peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the internet. So what does peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the internet mean? When you look at most of the internet company models, in the Silicon Valley, you realize that most of the services, they really struggle to come up with a revenue model for them to generate revenue for their businesses. You can talk about Google, you can talk about Facebook, you can talk about Twitter. So later they discovered that they could easily make money from data, essentially selling customer data, which when you look at it from an ethical standpoint, there's a thin line between whether it's good or bad. But I lean more on the bad because they monetize your data, sell it, and as a user, you don't get value in terms monetary value from your data. So and that model was inevitable for them to adopt them because there wasn't electronic cash system for them to build on, to be able to allow their users to generate income, and for the companies to generate revenue as well. So an internet, when you look at Facebook, for example, made very many attempts at creating their own electronic cash for people to use on Facebook. They came up with Facebook Credit, where someone could easily upload money on Facebook via their card or via PayPal. Then with your credits, you can be able to use Facebook, and Facebook will make money. That was before the ads came in. But today things have changed. So in a world where Bitcoin becomes the internet, becomes the payment protocol for the internet, you'd see, nano payments for things like search. So you can imagine, if you want to search something on Google, you go on Google, you search and pay a fraction of a cent. It could be a fraction of a cent of Kenya shilling. No one gives a damn about spending a fraction of a cent for search if the search results will be something closer to what you're looking for, or something, the exact thing that you're looking for, other than ads. And when you look at it in terms of revenue, so imagine Facebook, Google on a daily basis has, let's say, hundreds of millions of users and billions of search done on the engine. So if each search receives, from each search they make a fraction of a cent, then it's much more profitable than selling data in order to earn revenue. So that's the sole purpose of Bitcoin. Not about replacing government, not about replacing banks, or leading the world into anarchy, or becoming, or one world people talk about. So Bitcoin is basically a technology, just like TCP/IP protocol is for the internet. Bitcoin is a payment protocol for the internet. And number two, and this is now not within the Bitcoin communities, crypto communities. This misconception is on, the general people, anyone who hears the word Bitcoin. I think right now people think, most of the people believe that Bitcoin is a scam. And I don't blame them for that, because we've seen whenever there's an opportunity, it's human nature that people will come up with, will jump onto the next opportunity that looks more lucrative and try to build scams around it. And we've seen in Kenya, for example, we've seen a handful of maybe more of pyramid schemes that emerged out of the Bitcoin craze. So people taking advantage of information asymmetry. So the people down here, or the normal ordinary people who don't have the time to go search or learn about what this thing is, and they're more interested in, making money quick, they fall for the scams, and when they're scammed, then they call Bitcoin the pyramid scheme. So it's true. The first introduction to Bitcoin was through a pyramid scheme, but the reality is Bitcoin is not a pyramid scheme. Bitcoin is just a technology that people can build anything in the technology, just like you can build an app on Facebook, an app or whatever. People can build apps. People can build the future YouTube on Bitcoin. People can build the future Twitter on Bitcoin. And some of these apps that I'm talking about have already been built, and people are experimenting on how the market reacts to platform where you pay micropayment for writing your data. When people like, you get a micropayment, and those kind of things. So I would rather we have people focused on looking at what can they build on Bitcoin, or how can they leverage this new payment protocol for the internet to build new companies, and which could become unicorns in the near future. So I'm looking at how can they jump onto the next scam, next pyramid scam that comes into town and touts the name Bitcoin.
I'm just wondering, is there a hybrid between using the Bitcoin or system, the blockchain system, with a traditional financial system, especially for companies who want to, because at the end of the day, I think I don't know, maybe you can explain.
Okay.
Is it just the company, or even the customers need to start using this system, or it's just the payments?
Okay, so it's not just the payment. a payment is just one of the use cases. And like I gave you the example of the internet. That's the best example that the best analogy that you can use. So when the internet was created back in back in the 80s, and when it started maturing in the 1990s, we heard about .com bubble, and during the .com bubble, there were many companies. That's when Amazon, Google were born, and we had many companies that were rushing towards trying to adopt the internet, just like the rush we are seeing today with cryptocurrencies. And many companies are trying to build payments, blockchain payments protocols, just repeating the same thing that happened in the 80s and in the 90s with the internet. So what I think will happen, based on what I learned through reading and through history in the 90s, is eventually we are going to have one blockchain payment protocol that will be married to the internet. So look at and just to remind you what happened in the 90s. So we had financial institutions and companies that were building their own internal intranet. So we had the World Wide Web, the public internet, and we had companies building their own small internet because they believed that the World Wide Web was not secure, and they wanted to, have their data within a controlled environment, and have their own internal internet for communication and all these kind of things. So fast forward to today, the intranets of the 90s are not there, because think about it. So if Bank X had their own internet, Bank Y their own internet, in Kenya we have over 45 banks. So over 45 banks with their own internet, it becomes expensive, extremely expensive for the banks to be able to communicate, for their systems to be able to communicate. Now, I'm using the banks, but you can use any sector, government, to be able to communicate with each other, between ministries, because they are on different networks. So it becomes expensive to be able for interoperability, because if it's one bank, then to communicate with 45 banks, then they need to have 45 integration with these banks to be able to communicate in the same network, to be able to communicate. And that increases the cost of transaction, that increases the cost of communicating, and that increases the time they need to process transactions. So it becomes inefficient to do business. I believe that in the near future, let's say in the next 10 to 20 years, because I'm looking at the time it takes for new technology, new revolutionary technology to mature. The internet, I think, has taken about 40 years plus, and Bitcoin is just 11 years old today. So it could take 20 more years to sort of mature, but I think in this decade, we might see a lot of adoption going on. But I believe that once we're going to have one protocol that will be married to the internet, and companies like financial institutions will start building on that protocol. So the future products like M-Pesa will be built on this new protocol. Things like title deeds built on this new protocol. And the new protocol, the other advantage that it provides is it reduces significantly transaction costs. Number two, I think, and this I mentioned earlier, I mentioned in passing, that there has been rampant tampering with documents, especially, let's say, for example, in the land record. So you go to the land records today, you ask for, you do a search, you find that the land is okay, it's clear, you go buy it, then the following day you go back, it has issues. So because someone messed up with the system, so it has issues and you lose your land. So these things are going to be, in the past, once we have this protocol married to the internet and providing a solid base for companies to build these new innovations that do away with, record tampering and all those kind of things. So I think it's not just payment, it's many things. Anything you can build with the internet, once Bitcoin is married to the internet, can still be built on that new protocol.
And I think this is one of the things about if a government is to invest in a blockchain system, I know it's on, you have talked about the benefits. For example, you've talked about the transparency, ensuring that the corruption is reduced and ensuring that the record is kept for a very long time. So the other worry maybe governments might have is who is holding this data, and data protection issues. How can I hand over all the health records about Kenya for 46.7 million people, and I hand it over to an internet? Who is using this data? How safe is it? How are Kenyans safe? You know what I mean? Because health is such an important data.
Yeah.
And in this era, we are looking at data in a very keen and detailed way, because everyone is looking for data, the good guys and the good guys. So why should government take that risk?
Okay, so that's a very important question, and I'm glad you asked. So there has been this concern, and in my previous employment, I used to go pitch to governments. That was across Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, and the time I've been to South Africa as well, trying to pitch to governments to come on board or to try to educate them on the importance and the efficiencies that blockchains provide. So when it comes to data, storing data on the blockchain, so there are companies that are doing this work around the world. Let's say, for example, how the internet works, and how adoption happens. So first, governments and institutions slowly, were a little bit hesitant adopting the internet, because they were like, okay, so our information is on the internet. Internet is something that is dangerous. Then slowly they started building their own extranets. They were consulting, top IT firms around the world to come in with their extranets and all those kind of things. But eventually they learned that actually the internet is secure if you use it properly. And extranets just increases the cost of doing business. And when you're operating on an extranet, you are secluding yourself from the rest of the world. Then later we started talking about, but at that time most governments and companies were talking about, now yes, we are going on the internet, but we're going to, when it comes to data, we're going to self-host our data, self-hosting on the premise. So they buy their own servers, run their own servers on the ground, and to provide the services, and hire guys who are good in computer security to make sure that their data is safe. But later, when we started moving towards cloud, then cloud technology came in. Companies like Amazon started providing cloud. Google today now provides cloud services. And they were also hesitant that we don't want our data to be on the cloud. But then cloud provided, number one, 99% uptime in terms of access. Two, secure. And now when you talk about institutions and companies, most of them are hosted in the cloud. They're living on premise, because on premise is expensive. You have to have the servers. Whether you're using the servers or not, you still there's expenses. There is depreciation and electricity bills and all these kind of things. But when you're running on the server on the cloud, then you're only paying for what you use. So when it comes to blockchain, it's almost the same case, but I think blockchain is a little bit more secure because the companies that are Kenya, for example, and I think this is something that should be done. Kenya, for example, or any other African country in the world can choose to become a participant on the Bitcoin network. By becoming a participant, that means they are confirming this transaction in the Bitcoin network. When parking ticket is issued in the US, and the US parking ticket system is running on the Bitcoin blockchain, then any country that is participating on this network can be able to process that transaction, depending on how fast they are. And these are machines competing against each other, depending on the speed. And they earn revenue from that as well. But at the same time, when they are processing, number one, they don't even know that that is a parking ticket they're processing. They only know that it's a transaction that they're processing. Number two, this transaction is, they only store what we call, it's a little bit technical, they store what we call hash. That's the only thing they store. But the departments that are receiving this information, that are legally, lawfully allowed to receive this information, that is the police department and the justice system, see that it's someone who is paying for his parking ticket, or is paying for his, fine for flouting traffic rules. But the entity that is processing this transaction, that is not lawfully allowed to look into this transaction, know the details of this transaction, can't check this transaction. So I'll give you an example, though it's not a better example because it shows a little bit of inefficiencies. So we've had instances where people had their bitcoins long time ago. They had stored their bitcoins in the hard drive, and right now they cannot be able to access their wallets because they forgot the password. But they can only trace they can only see their bitcoins on the screen, but they cannot access them. So that's how secure it is. No one can be able to access that data unless they are legally, lawfully allowed to do so, either by a court order or whatever, or either by a court order, or I think just by a court order. That's when they can be able to access, or legally allowed, by provisions of law to access the data. And in this case, these are institutions that are providing the service, or institutions that are involved down the line to maybe justice system or law enforcement. But no one else can be able to access the data. So it's only the public keys, which we call them public keys. They're not public keys. It's a public hash function that is displayed on the network just to show that this transaction has been processed. But the transaction doesn't speak about whether it's health transaction, whether it's a defense contract, whether it's an ID that has been issued in the blockchain. Those details are not put there. They are encrypted. So in terms of security, when institutions are looking to join blockchain network, whether it's on the Bitcoin blockchain or any other, I think they need not worry about security, because this is proven.
Yeah, and I think it will still take time for governments to come on board. Of course, I think data protection is one of the big issues, and I'm glad that Bitcoin has tried to do something to ensure that exchange of data is secure and that there's some level of data protection. So let me ask you now. I was listening. I think I watched. I saw an article. I think it's you who had shared. I'm not sure, or it's someone talking about the value of Bitcoin, and I was like, okay, I thought I could buy a Bitcoin, but then what is the current status and what is the future of Bitcoin in terms of value?
I'll tell you what I think is the current value of Bitcoin and what drives the value. So ideally, what should drive the value of Bitcoin is utility. Utility in terms of how many real businesses are actually using Bitcoin. Just like what drives the value of a company, it's the number of sales the company has done and production, and you can be able to determine what is the real value of the company. So, and in terms of future plans, what are the projections? Those kind of things. Those are the fundamentals. But it's important to know that there are various versions of Bitcoin. But there's various versions of Bitcoin. So there's the Pioneer Bitcoin, which is called BTC. BTC is a pioneer, goes by the name Bitcoin, but there's a discourse within the Bitcoin community, and some people like myself feel that BTC does not really represent the idea that was shared in the white paper, because the idea stipulates on what Bitcoin is. And as a matter of fact, there's a legal battle on that matter in a court in Florida Beach in US and in London as well. So the BTC version of Bitcoin is the value is being driven majorly by speculation. Right now, I think it's trading at about $7,000, which is close to four point something million shillings each. And when you look at the speculation aspect of Bitcoin, the speculation aspect of it is people buying, hoping, believing that it's digital gold. So that's what that group of people believe. That this is digital gold to replace gold. So it's so sound money. It's going to take away, it's going to become the world's reserve currency, replace the dollar, and all those manner of things. So their aim is to buy a Bitcoin and to hold it. So when you look at buying something, a product, and holding it, there is no real value that the product is providing. You're only hoping that more people will come in and buy. And when the more people come in and buy, then there's more value. It goes up because many people want to come buy a scarce resource, a scarce item. So I think when you start defining a pyramid scheme, I think that understanding of that expectation would easily translate to it being a pyramid scheme. When you look at the BTC aspect of it, then there's BCH, which is called Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash, I think right now is trading at about $400 and split from BTC in 2018 to form a different path, and they believe in the electronic cash system. But then again, they went ahead and removed what we call signatures and added things called not signature. So this removes the linkability, how you can be able to link the linkability function within transactions. So it makes it difficult to follow transactions. So it is not in compliance with tracing laws. It violates the FinCEN guideline and the Financial Action Task Force guideline on cryptocurrencies. So when you look at it, it's not the best contender for becoming electronic peer-to-peer cash. And three, it doesn't meet the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper of 2008, because it has violated some of the sections of the white paper. Then there's BSV, which they call it the Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, because it is much close. It follows the 2008 Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. He's the one. Satoshi Nakamoto is the person who wrote the white paper anonymously before he came forward to claim his work and claimed copyrights on the Bitcoin white paper. So he believes, the proponents of Bitcoin Satoshi Vision believes that it fully implements the white paper and believe that it's the one that should be called Bitcoin, and this other one should remain because they are violating the copyright held by Satoshi Nakamoto. So when you look at it, what drives value is utility. So Bitcoin is trying to have value driven by utility, where people, companies can come and build software on top of Bitcoin, and take products to market, build logistics, tracing applications, build digital central bank digital currencies on top of this layer, build the future things like M-Pesa on this layer. So for them, and that is part of the group that I subscribe to in terms of the school of thought, is when more companies start building valuable companies on Bitcoin protocol, then we see tremendous appreciation in value. So it's not about holding, it's about use. So when more people use, when more people build applications that drive utility, then that lends value to Bitcoin rather than just buying and holding and hoping that the price goes up. So so that when people think about Bitcoin, they need to think about this tree, and there are different school of thought. But then again, they should be alive to the fact that there's a matter in in a court in the UK and the court in the US looking at copyright infringement on Bitcoin, and the guys within BSP are the ones who feel like the copyright has been infringed, and so we'll see how that plays out in the course of the year, because one of the cases I think will be hard on 16th. The trial has been set on 16th in the UK, and the one in the one in the US, the trial I think was set for 4th of May this year. So we might see what comes out of it. So if it happens, then we might see a change of name, and then moving forward, we might see now stable price movement driven by utility, not pure speculation. Utility. Yeah. So in terms of where do I see the price move in future? So I think for utility-driven adoption, I think, or investment, I think the price it depends. When more users, when more innovators come on board and start solving problems, there are many problems that exist today in healthcare, in land, when it comes to tax, how to collect tax efficiently, in terms of logistics, in terms of even defense. There are many challenges today, even in terms of new social media applications, how we derive value from social media use. So there are many problems that we're trying to solve. When we see these companies solve these problems and gain adoption, then the value of Bitcoin will follow. So I think in the next decade we're going to see, we might see an appreciation of value based on utility, not speculation.
Wow, this is quite interesting. I have learned so much, and I think I have also, been really following keenly and trying to understand all these. And I think one of the things about what I'm getting from the last remarks from you is the fact that there needs to be a consensus and clear way that Bitcoin or digital currencies is being run, so that they can also build a long-term trust with their targeted clients, yeah, so that people can come on board and start utilizing this system. So I think that is, and I think why there could be those parallel different networks is the fact that again, internet provides a lot of solutions, but also a lot of threats, and yeah, people choose to use different products because they have different interests, or that product serves them, in a particular way, and not the other one.
Yeah. So I think the current existence of parallel Bitcoin networks, or networks that are passing off as a Bitcoin, and they're not Bitcoin, yeah, but they are just taking advantage of, they want to use the brand name of Bitcoin, is one, they're actually doing it in a blatant infringement of patent and copyright laws. So, and the creator of Bitcoin just started recently to enforce his copyright claim, and I think very soon he'll start enforcing his patent claim on the Bitcoin code. So when that is done, and we've had exchanges as well, exchanges that have fueled this and contributed greatly to this blatant infringement of the copyright and patent laws. And so once, if this case is in court, if you win this case is in court, and there's highly likelihood that he's going to win, because patents have been issued by the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, and the U.S. Patent Office issued the issued the U.S. Copyright Office issued the copyright on the literally work on the Bitcoin white paper. So it's a matter of it, and most of the exchanges, just like many, some of the people in crypto believe that crypto exists outside of the law, so they keep trading some tokens as Bitcoin, yet they're not Bitcoin. And when you look at it, that's actually, it's fraud. If you're trading product claiming it's Bitcoin is not. So that's a crime. So when this matter goes through the court and a judgment is done and an order is issued to these exchanges, then these exchanges will not have any any other option other than to remove those protocols that are trading as Bitcoin and yet they're not Bitcoin. So I think that we're looking at, in my own estimation, I think this year we see that will stop this year. Looking at, the trial dates that have been set for Satoshi Nakamoto or Craig Wright, Dr. Craig Wright to, go through the court process and have it resolved. So I think we're looking at, by the end of the year, I think that will have been changed. And I think when that happens, we might see, movements within the crypto markets that were not expected. And I think moving forward then, now with the patent secured, we can have consensus on one major protocol, because the protocol one is secured by patents and copyrights, and therefore there cannot be exact copies of the same. So it's important actually to have consensus, and there is actually a plan to have consensus and to have one major protocol to to be more prominent. And other protocols that will come, I think it's also better to have competition. But when other protocols come, it's better that other protocols are not exact copies of the same. So then that encourages, healthy competition and sparse innovation, which is something that is welcome.
Oh, that would be nice to also see how innovation is driven along that line as well. So I don't know if you have anything else to add. I have really enjoyed the discussion this morning, and it's afternoon for you. So I don't know if you have any final words you'd like to tell the audience who still feel like they still don't have more information, or they are a little bit confused, maybe what would you like to tell them?
Okay, so this is what I want to tell the audience. I am I think most of the audience, most would be, let's say, late 80s kids or 90s kids. So most of us came into being when there was already, a gold rush during the dot-com bubble. And when you read through history, I've read through history what happened at that time, and it was exhilarating. People who lived that time have stories to tell. And I feel that the exact thing that happened in the 1990s is happening now. And it's important, irrespective of the field, I think it's important to try to understand from a research perspective, research, academic, to read and, be part of the conversation. And if anyone is going to, once you have a better understanding of what of the discourse that is happening within the Bitcoin space and the digital currency space today, then you can, contribute from an informative perspective, and only then, I feel, only then should you look into, if you feel it's the right space and someone wants to have, a piece of the pie, then only then should you invest. If someone is looking to get involved in terms of investing in the space. But I would discourage investing, in a whim, not having enough information, not participating in understanding what's going on, because there's a lot going on. Personally, when I came into the space, I took about, I have a background in finance, so it was easy for me to get a hang of it. And it took me one full year to learn, get myself educated, and to look at whether this could become, system just like the internet. And 5 years on, I have the conviction. My view has changed over a period of time, and that is good. And I still have the conviction that we are much closer to having one protocol that marries the internet, the payment internet gateway, as the internet payment protocol, and we might see products coming out of it, which is which would be actually which would be good, and something that I can share from my journey for the past 5 years. So again, learning is important.
Yeah.
Learn. Then look into what you can build first. If there's something you can build, you have technical expertise, or you are an entrepreneur who don't have the technical expertise but have capital and wants to support entrepreneurs that are looking into building solutions that will give utility to solve problems, then you can participate. And if you're looking into directly buying Bitcoin in the hope that companies that are coming in to build will build and get a drive adoption, then that's something you can do after learning.
Thank you so much. I think I agree with you more. The fact that people need to do more learning and research and understand before they can get into anything that they want to do. Not only about Bitcoin, but also about other things, because we've seen people, falling into the traps about on pyramid, and people lose money and they have really worked hard to earn their money. So I have really taken that back to me as well. I'm also I think I'm an entrepreneur by blood, I think. At least that's what I tell myself, but I have really learned a lot. So thank you so much.
There's no question.
Yes?
There's no question about that.
Oh.
Thank you for having me. I'm saying there's no question about you being an entrepreneur by blood.
Yes, I can sell anything that is illegally allowable to be sold. And I think that is the spirit that we need to see in young people. That is the thing that we want to see. Honestly, my dream is to ensure that we can see people coming up with innovations, people selling what is so good about Kenya, people being able to use technology to develop solutions that actually work for us. Solutions that actually solve our day-to-day challenges, and it does not mean it's supposed to be digital as well, like technology. It could be anything. It could be something social, social sciences, natural sciences, anything that can help. But we need to just start somewhere and crawl, because we really need to ensure that we secure the future of our young ones who are coming behind us.
Okay, so saying when you look at the future of Africa in terms of the rising population and the huge urban rural to urban movement, and at the same time there's much of the food that we are importing from other countries, especially countries like Kenya, and I think there's a risk. There's a risk of, there's a food security risk that you're facing. And some of it could be solved by simple problems, by simple solutions. So, for example, I'll give you an example of a company in some entrepreneurs in Australia that have created a solution. They're calling it this is a simple, very simple solution. They call it Weather SB. Weather SB. Just a second. So they call it Weather SB, Weather SB.app. So what this does, and I think we're just giving ideas. So what are the things that can be good, and what are those that have already been built that people can borrow from these ideas and look at, how they can make it work for their localities, for their communities. So Weather SB.app, Weather then SB.app is an application, web application that was built by two Australian entrepreneurs, and they built it on the Bitcoin network. where they record weather data from 6,651 weather channels around the world. And so I was privileged to, and this data is recorded in the blockchain. So as long as the blockchain will exist, the data will still be there. So anyone who wants to look at the, let's say, for example, they're moving into a new location in, someone working in, who has come to Nairobi, school in Nairobi, and they feel like they want to engage into agriculture because they've seen a problem, and they want to engage in agriculture in a town not far away from Nairobi, and they don't know about the weather conditions in that place, how weather changes over time. They can easily go on to Weather SV and have the entire data at their disposal. And now this data, I was privileged to fund. I was privileged to fund the recording of data for a couple of weather stations in Nairobi. I think I funded, not in Nairobi, in Kenya. I think I funded about 20 weather stations, weather channels in Nairobi. So what that means is that for $5 that I funded, this $5 would be used for each weather station. This $5 would be used to write transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain every day, recording the weather in terms of humidity, rainfall, all those kind of things on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that data will be stored forever. So, so I'm going to keep funding it so that we can have this data, because as opposed to, before, if you wanted to access weather data, this data was stored in silos. So there's data for like 10 years, then when you want to, when it's 20 years, you want to go back and check what was the weather so that you can be able to predict the future. It becomes difficult to access this data because either the data is not available as far back as you want, or it was deleted or something happened to the data. But now we have a place where people can go and find this data. And there are many use cases around just whether it's be alone, predictive ecology, all these kind of things, agriculture, soil. We can start, taking IoT devices into soil and tracking, measuring soil in terms of humidity and all those kind of things, and storing it in the blockchain. And can be really helpful in terms of when someone wants to venture into agriculture, when it comes to making decisions at high level with regards to agriculture and food security. So this is just one, weathersv.app. If anyone wants to go check out weathersv, they can go check out weathersv.app and see in real life the power of Bitcoin. Not as an investment, but as a platform to build powerful applications on, and how these applications can be able to impact life and their communities.
Wow, thank you so much. I will also check on that. I think this has been very interesting session, and this is a very good solution. I think even researchers, especially those people working on climate change and who want to understand climate science more, can also get a chance to do that. So at this point, I don't want to keep you up so much. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the fact that you agreed to come and share about your knowledge, something that you've been researching on your own for 5 years, and you decided to come and share with everyone. Thank you so much. I have learned a lot, and I hope that our viewers in our audience will also get to learn, or they have learned after watching this video. So thank you so much. I'll just remind our viewers to continue subscribing and like the video and leave your comments. If you have any questions directed to Jibril or myself, you can leave them on the comment, and I'm sure we'll be able to get to you. You'll also find the email address where you can send more questions, or if you need any direct advice from Jibril, you can email, and then you'll be able to get to him. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jibril. I bet now it's lunchtime, so have a good lunch.
Thank you. Super hungry.
Yeah.